In this video, I'm going to teach you the 4 archetypal questions that show up in every orals examination. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Tom Mullaney, and this is First Gen Professor, where we discuss how academia really works. So if you're a grad student or if you're navigating an academic career, please consider subscribing. Okay, you are practicing for your orals exam, you are reading hundreds of books and hundreds of articles, and the thought has occurred to you, with all of these different works I'm reading in all of their possible combinations, the number of questions I could be asked in the exam is practically infinite. Right? Wrong. There are 4 archetypal questions that show up over and over again in orals examinations, and the trick to a successful exam is being able to recognize them. So let's walk through them right now. And be sure to stay around to the end of the video because I'm going to give a download link where you can download a printed version of these 4 archetypal questions. Archetypal question number 1. In this question, you are being asked to walk the examiner through the history of research on a given subject. Now, sometimes this question is really obvious to spot. If the examiner articulates their question really clearly, there's no mistaking it. Walk me through the past 50 years in the study of the Industrial Revolution. How has scholarship on the Russian Revolution changed over the past 30 years? When you hear a question like this, it's completely obvious what you're being asked to do. But sometimes this question arrives in disguise. The question of modernity has been a preoccupation in Egyptian history. Can you walk me through that? The concept of total war is really central to the study of the Second World War. What is that? Notice how nothing in these questions clearly articulates that the examiner wants you to walk them through the literature. And if you're watching this video now, sitting on your couch, totally relaxed, thinking, oh yeah, well that's pretty obvious. Remember, in the exam, you're not going to be in your sweatpants alternating between binging on Netflix and then watching YouTube videos. You're going to be stressed out of your gourd, and stress really messes with your cognitive functions. So you're going to miss things. In this case, if you do pick up on the fact that you're being asked a literature review type of question, well, then the architecture of your answer is going to be pretty straightforward. In the case of total war in the Second World War, you might want to walk your examiner through the concept of total war as it has been conceptualized in the 1950s and 60s, the 1970s and 80s, and maybe the 90s and aughts. In the case of Egyptian modernity, maybe you're going to be walking the examiner through the major works that have tried to conceptualize Egyptian modernity over time. But if you don't pick up on the fact that you're being asked a literature review question, things can go very wrong very quickly. You might get nervous and then jump in and start trying to reconstruct the entire history of modern Egypt, of the Second World War in all of its complexity, all in 6 minutes. It can't be done. Turn back, turn back! So this brings us to a key element that I'm going to be talking about throughout this video, which is that an orals exam answer is won or lost really in the opening seconds of the answer. In this case, there's a kind of fork in the road, and if you take the right turn and understand the question you're being asked, well, then the path unfurls before you, and it's pretty clear where you need to go. But if you take the wrong turn, you might go down a path that is a dead end. And here's the scary part. You're going to be so stressed during the exam that you're not even going to realize you took a wrong turn until you get halfway down, and then it's too late. So the first archetypal question, which you need to be able to spot, and more importantly, discern when the examiner doesn't articulate it that clearly, is the literature review question. The second archetypal question is a real doozy. This is the what is X question. What is modernity? What is empire? What is gender? What is colonialism? Oh my God, what? This type of question is a killer. But don't worry, because I'm going to teach you what to do. The secret to the what is X archetypal question is that you're actually being asked to do 2 things instead of 1. Most questions, all you're being asked to do is answer the question. But in the case of a what is X question, what you're really being asked to do first is to re-articulate the question in a form that can actually be answered and which is meaningful in its being answered. What is empire? Well, this question cannot be answered in 6 minutes. Not if we take that question to mean that I need to define what empire is, give examples from history, work through all of the literature on what it is. It can't be done. So what I'm really being asked to do is take this massive amorphous question and then give it shape, and then answer that question that I have just articulated. Rephrase the question and then answer it. Now here's the awesome thing. You can reframe this question however you see fit. So remember I told you about the first archetypal question, the literature review question? Well, it's your prerogative to take that what is X question and to rephrase it as a literature review question. That's totally legitimate. What is modernity? You can take that question, articulate it as a literature review question, and then repose it to the examiner as perhaps the question of modernity has been approached through 3 major paradigms since the Second World War, and they are A, B, and C. Do you see how I just jujitsu'd that question into something that I can tackle, that I can answer? Well, that's technically speaking what you are being asked to do. So you're not really tricking anyone. That's actually what the examiner wants you to do, even when they don't realize it. Now, you don't have to transmute this question into a literature review question. You could also translate it into, for lack of a better word, an empirical question. So in the case of the what is modern question, maybe instead of talking about how different historians have dealt with that question, you might choose 3 phases and 3 exemplary groups of people in the country you study who have dealt with that question. Well, the question of modernity has been central to political culture in place X, and I'm going to walk us through 3 phases of that: the late 19th century, the interwar period, and the 1960s. Let's begin. But keep in mind, if you decide to take this what is X question and turn it into a kind of empirical historical answer, make sure that you do not lose sight of the authors on your reading list. You don't want to abandon all of those hundreds of books and articles that you read in preparation and simply recite the facts that you learned. You still want to be name dropping the authors or the pieces by which you learned how to reconstruct this history. Every 30 seconds to 60 seconds, the name of an author should be coming out of your mouth. So this is the key to neutralizing this otherwise terrifying type of question, the what is X question. Question number 3, the big comparative question. Remember, you're going to be in a room with faculty who come from a variety of different fields because you're taking different components of your orals exam in different fields with different professors. This is great, but it raises the possibility that one or another of those examiners are going to ask you a question that relates to something that you said in a previous exam. And let's say that the French history component of your orals exam comes after the German history component. Well, the examiner for the French history component might actually reference something that you said in the prior part, which they witnessed. How did the experience of the French, vis-a-vis some phenomenon, compare to those of Germans? So this, once again, is a massive question. Technically speaking, if you take that question at face value, it can't be answered in 6 minutes. People spend their whole careers on this question. As in the case of the second archetypal question, what is X? In this massive comparison of X and Y type question, what you need to do is first give the question shape and structure. You need to re-articulate it in a way that is meaningful, but is actually feasible to answer. And you can use the same jujitsu trick. You can take that question and turn it into an historiographic or literature review question. You could also take that question and turn it into an empirical question. It's up to you. So in the case of how does France and Germany compare with regard to a particular phenomenon, it is totally legitimate for you to say approaches to phenomenon X in the French historiography versus the German historiography differ in 3 ways. A, B, and C. Let me begin. That's totally a legitimate way to answer. You see what I'm getting at here? The reason that you need to be able to identify these archetypes is that you don't want to just jump into the question and start answering it at face value. Because the fact of the matter is, so many of the questions that you get during orals exams, if you take them at face value, can't be answered in 6 minutes. You need to give them structure. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, this is unfair, it really should be the examiner's job to ask this question clearly and succinctly so I know what I'm being asked, I totally agree with you. But I also want to say that's life, and we need to deal with it as it comes. This is totally an asymmetric relationship of power in that exam. The faculty members can't fail the exam. You can. So it is true that examiners can totally screw up a question and throw you off. What I'm here to say is that I want you to learn as best you can how not to be thrown off by these questions. And by being able to recognize them and realize what you're able to do with them, you're going to be able to navigate and withstand that highly asymmetric relationship that takes place in the examination room. Before we get to the last archetype, consider giving this video a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss a video. Okay, the fourth archetype, the factual question. Having discussed all of these other types of question, what is modernity, walk me through the literature on this particular subject, do not lose sight of the fact that one type of question you could be asked is just a straight up factual question. What was the literacy rate in late Qing China? In an average month, how often would a peasant in Tokugawa, Japan have encountered a state official? What was the population of Egypt in 1900? This type of question is simultaneously one of the most nerve-wracking, but also one of the easiest to deal with. First, let's get right out of the way what you don't want to do. What you don't want to do is, if you don't know the answer, to waste a long period of time bullshitting. The reason is, it doesn't do you any good because you don't know the answer, but then you're shooting yourself in the foot by burning more time in your exam. So not only are you getting this one wrong, but you're robbing yourself of opportunities to get something else right. So if you don't know the answer, what you want to do is briefly think through and out loud about how you would go about offering a speculative answer to the question. For example, if you're being asked a question on some phenomenon in the year 1900 and you're just not quite clear on that particular factoid, but you really know the 1880s corresponding fact, and you really know the 1920s corresponding fact, then briefly tell the examiner, well, in 1880, blah, 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 and in 1920, blah, 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 as we know from authors A and B, I would venture a guess that roughly in 1900, blah. Do you see what I just did? I used the opportunity to list two of the authors who I know by heart, and I used the opportunity to spotlight what I do know about the 1880s and the 1920s, which is quite reasonable if I'm trying to think through what the answer for 1900 might be. Although I do confess, I don't remember the answer for 1900. So the key of this is you're using the opportunity to spotlight what you do know, but you're being honest that you don't know the answer, and you're not wasting time bullshitting. So then we can move on to another question that you will nail and keep up the momentum. So for those of you who have made it to the end, here is that promised download link. Just head to this link and you're going to find a way to download a PDF copy that walks you through these 4 archetypal questions so that you can incorporate this into your practice sessions in advance of the exam. Well, that's it for us today. Thanks so much for coming. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.